Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Flood, and I am just honored to be with you here tonight. If you could just let me know that you could see me, if anyone out there is watching, give me a thumbs up or a heart or a wave. That would be amazing. Like I said, my name is Erin Flood, and I am honored to be back again with the Women's Empowerment Series to talk about changing your narrative and how you can really step up as a leader in your own life. Thanks, Christina. I see your hearts. Thanks. Hi. How you can really step up as a leader in your own life to direct the narrative that tells the story about who you are and the quality of your experiences. Oh, I'm so excited. I can see so many of my favorite people here. Tammy and Amy, and you guys, my mom and dad are here. My husband's Aunt Peg is here. Hi, Peg. I'm so thrilled to be with all of you tonight. Whew, I just need to take a deep breath. I'm already starting to sweat. So the reason why I get so passionate about this topic is because I want you to know that I have lived every single bit of what I'm going to talk about tonight. I've lived every single bit of telling a narrative or telling my story in a way that doesn't work. And I have figured out, I hope, how to direct the narrative in a way that's positive. I'm just getting some messages. Be patient. All right, looks like we're good. So we're just gonna get rolling. We're just gonna get right into it. I'm gonna be watching the comments. So if you at any time have any questions or comments, this is pretty informal. So I want you to feel free, like you can jump in and this can still be a conversation. I just want to start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I am a trained educator. I was a teacher, 612 certified for high school English. And then I went on to be a principal. And then all of a sudden I thought, you know what, maybe this isn't for me anymore. To be honest, I got burnt out and thought I need to see how I can better serve my family and continue, obviously, my love of serving women and children in the community, which I've been able to do now that I'm a stay-at-home mom and doing some volunteering in our community, a lot of which is for the Women's Empowerment Series. I'm so grateful that they've allowed me to be involved. Now that I'm home, we have 2 boys and my husband, Eric, and a dog who you may hear whining by the bedroom, our bedroom door where I am right now, who really would like to come in here and be with me. And the thing that I quickly realized was that as a stay-at-home mom, I really missed the connection of the people that I had at school. I missed my students. I missed the teachers. I missed seeing parents. I missed feeling that part of the community that I had when I was at school. And that's really where kind of this calling to volunteering. And I started a podcast, which we'll link, but it's called the United State of Us podcast, where I get to do the thing that I miss most, which is talking to other women about their experiences and their stories and allowing them, or hopefully giving them, a platform to just share stories about their life so that we can all learn from them. And that has been something that I started just in the last year during the pandemic madness. And it has been something that I think I'm most proud of in my life, because I just feel so honored that people are willing to share their stories with me. So that's just kind of a little bit about what I do now. But I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about my experience teaching. And here's why. As a high school English teacher, I spent a ton of time talking about stories. I read novels with my students and we talked about characters, and we wrote stories about their lives and about fictional stories, fictional characters. We did a lot of work around storytelling. And as part of that storytelling adventure, I learned two things. One was everybody kind of has a good idea about where they want, if we're writing, about where they want to start their story. And everyone has a pretty good idea about where they want their story to end. But where my students struggled to write the most was the middle, right? So at the beginning, I have an idea. I can say, oh, I'm going to have this character, and in the end, they're going to do, maybe it's get married, maybe it's run a business, maybe, I don't know, maybe they kill them off in the end. But everyone has a pretty good idea about where their story is going to start and where they want their story to end. But the middle was a struggle. And so one of the things that I didn't realize was that in teaching my students how to write a good story, right? Good character development. It's that middle, messy middle. One of the things that I didn't realize was that I was going to be figuring out in future years what I would need to do to tell my own story, to be my own narrator. Did anybody watch the Wonder Years when you were younger? I'm going to date myself here. But the Wonder Years was one of my favorite shows. And the reason why it was one of my favorite shows, not only because of the innocence of it, and I mean, Fred Savage was adorable, and Winnie Cooper, who didn't want to be Winnie? I wanted to be Winnie Cooper. But I loved the narrator. It was that calming voice that always told the story of these kids' lives, right? It was making sense of all of the things that seemed messy in the middle of the people's lives. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the middle of our story. And I don't know about you, but if you're watching, I'd assume you're like me. You're somewhere in the middle. And so we're going to talk about your character and how we're going to take today as the beginning of your character's story. And we're going to talk about how we get through the middle and get the right details so that we can end up where we want our character to be in the end. So the first thing I would have my students do when they developed a character, and if you're watching and you were in my Raising a Grown-Up class with the Women's Empowerment series earlier this year, you know that one of the things that we did is we drew a stick figure. A little head, a body, little legs, little arms. And on that stick figure, we identified three things. We said, well, every good story, right? Because I want a good story. I don't know about you, but I want a really good one. It doesn't have to be outlandish or crazy, but I just want a good story. So we looked at three things. We looked at what's in a character's head, so their thoughts. What's in a character's heart, their feelings. And then the hands and the feet, what are their character's actions? What are the things that they do with their hands and their feet that really tell us a lot about them? So during the writing process, my students would say, like, okay, I can get a general outline. I can get a general outline of what my character's gonna think, those thoughts, right? Only, as you know, sometimes thoughts, they evolve, hopefully, and they change and grow, and we know that they evolve through our experiences and through the way that we perceive things. And so we really wanted to get into what helps us to identify our thoughts and direct our thoughts in a way where we want them to go. And so first, it's recognizing who is narrating our story at the beginning of our life. So if we take our story today, what are our thoughts, our reactions to the world around us, and our ability to use wisdom and facts to determine what the next steps are in our life. In the podcast that I do, the first question I ask women is, tell me how you can describe yourself by the roles and the titles that you hold. Tell us a little bit about you. And I'm telling you, that's easy. They tell me I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor, I'm a stay-at-home mom, I'm a teacher. we like to identify who we are, to start to list who we are as a character in our own story by a lot of external influences, a lot of external titles. And then my second question on my podcast is always, if you didn't describe yourself with those titles that you're given by the outside world, by these roles that you hold, how would you describe yourself? And what do you think happens? There's a big pause. That question is a lot harder. And I think it's hard for a few reasons. One, we like to say who we are and tell people about ourselves by what we do. And we like to tell, the other thing that happens is we like to tell our story with the permission of things that other people said that we were. That other people said that we were, a qualified doctor, or, things that happen in us outside of ourselves. That's a lot more comfortable to talk about than who we are inside, who we are outside of those roles and titles. And I didn't realize how this applied to my life and applied to my own storytelling until I walked away from my job as a principal and became a stay-at-home mom. And I went to a social function and somebody said, "Hi, nice to meet you." I introduced myself and they said, "Oh, well, what do you do?" And I suddenly didn't have a title that I felt gave me validation to tell people that I was. I couldn't say I was a teacher. I couldn't say I was a principal. And so I started to make myself small. I would say things like, "Well, I'm just a stay-at-home mom." Yeah, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. Or I would give a past tense title. I would say, "Oh, I just, decided to stay home with my kids. I'm really choosing the life as a stay-at-home mom right now. I feel very fortunate to do it. I eventually want to go back." I would start to talk around. Ooh, the sun just came out. Sorry, I'm sitting by a window. I started to talk around and make myself smaller than I had before, because I didn't have a title or an acknowledgement that somebody else gave me that said who I was and why I was worthy of introducing myself or being with these people. And so if you had to really look and you had to describe yourself and say who you were outside of your roles and titles, that's the character that we're starting with today on day one of our story. Now, at some point, we all know that our qualities or our characteristics, those two things become one, right? They meld. It's really difficult to separate one from the other. But for the point of this exercise, I want you to just think about, on day one of our story today, how you would describe yourself outside of your roles and titles you held. So as I went about and I started to really think about how I was telling my story, what I realized was that the thoughts that I had about being a stay-at-home mom really leaked over into everything else. I started to make not only myself smaller in rooms that I stepped into because I didn't have an outside title anymore to describe who I was, but that I'm just, or that that smaller, taking up less space than what I was created to, leaked into everything else. And suddenly, the story I was telling myself, everywhere I existed, I wasn't enough for that space. I doubted who I was as a mother and how I showed up. I doubted who I was as a wife and how I showed up as a wife. I was back in my kind of childhood, middle child syndrome. My parents are watching now, so they're probably laughing. But back in I wonder if I exist. I wonder if anyone, I almost felt like I was like fading into the background of my life. Even though nothing about my circumstance had changed other than the fact that I didn't hold a role or a title outside my home. And so maybe some of you who have gone through transitions like this have felt this way. And And my biggest realization was that my thoughts about myself were so greatly impacting the joy I was experiencing in my life, because I thought that the change of circumstance, one that I willingly made, I thought that the change of those circumstances changed what was in here and what was in here, and it didn't. Just because we go through a transition, or our character in our story goes through a transition, and I mean, if we all have not probably had these thoughts in the last year, I don't know what would maybe cause us to have these things. But all of this uncertainty, or these times of transition, we have to remember that the thoughts that we had about who we were in one circumstance don't go away just because we don't exist in that circumstance anymore. Those things are with us, they're in us, they are part of us. The only thing that changed was how I was thinking and framing all of my experiences. So we're playing outside with my kids when I had maybe a healthier thought process about who I was as a person, as a character in my story. I felt like a champion mother when I came home from work and was like, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to go outside and play with my kids. I felt like a great mom, because I thought, gosh, I've been gone from them all day. Let's just get outside and play. And then when I became a stay-at-home mom and I didn't have those other things to help shape my thought pattern, and I wasn't with my kids all day because they were at school. Well, one of them was at school all day. And I went outside to play with my kids after school. Suddenly, I was not a champion mother in my mind anymore. Suddenly, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I'm just playing in the yard. What have I done today? What is my value now that I don't hold the value that I thought I did before because of a job or a title? So my thoughts affected the quality of my life. My need to make myself smaller because I didn't have that outside validation that I didn't even recognize that I needed. It affected the quality of my life. I didn't get joy out of the things I used to get joy out of anymore because I changed the way I was talking to myself about it. And so when we did character development at school in my classroom, that's the first thing we talked about. How do we make our characters real? My kids, they knew the beginning, they knew the end. We knew the middle was a little bit more challenging. It was messier. But the reason why it was so hard was that a believable story is messy in the middle. It's a mess. Because most of the time, people's thoughts are kind of a mess. And I was an example of that. And so I had to retrain my brain. I had to really learn how to talk to myself. So here's what I learned. Oh, I have a kid in here. I'm sorry, everybody.
She's still not here.
That's okay. I'm on live. See, everybody, Facebook. This is real life. This is real life, everyone. This is William.
Hi.
Okay, you have to go, buddy. Can you take the dog? Well, if this isn't a real life interruption, I don't know what is. Thank you, Will. That's okay. Just go, buddy. I have to keep talking, okay? Thank you. Grandma and Grandpa, too bad you don't live closer, huh? Yeah, have you wrangle my beasts in here. Okay, anyway. So once we started to talk about a character's thought process, we started to talk about how do we separate what they think from how they feel. And you notice that I even had a hard time talking about the quality of my thoughts without talking about the quality of my feelings. And here's what we talked about. Thank you for your patience while I just collect myself for a second after my child's interruption. Our thoughts and our feelings are so closely aligned, right? They're so closely aligned because our thoughts speak life to what's going on inside. And so sometimes we give life or name or something to a thought, and we attach it to, we call it maybe the wrong feeling, and things get a little messy. And so here's what we're going to think about when we talk about our heart and our head. I want you to think about the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Now, I'm going to keep going on my discussion from leaving my job. So when I left work, I was around a ton of people in a school, right? So many. And then when I started to stay home, I spent the most time with, at the time, a 4-year-old, because we were together half the day. And then a lot of people on the internet, on like social media. And if you've done it, and you probably have done it more in this last year, I would guess, than probably ever before, you know where I'm probably going with this. When you scroll, although it takes up a ton of time, right? I tend to sit more in comparison than anything else. And I bring this up because the quality of my thoughts when I live in comparison, not great. And so the quality of how I feel about everything that I experience in my life, what's the direct correlation? It goes down. And so when you think about the 5 people that you spend the most time with in your life, I want you to think about how they impact the narrative that you're telling, how they impact those thoughts, how you describe the experiences and the feelings that you're having. So for example, my 4-year-old at the time, he was a cup filler. We snuggled. I had never been home to experience the at-home afternoons with him. He was like a kiddo who was either with a babysitter at school or in daycare or frequently. So for him to stay home with me was kind of a gift, and I felt really great about it. And we played, and that was a cup filler. So check, that was one. And the other people that I was physically with, although my family is incredibly, incredibly supportive, my husband and my parents and my sisters, and they're all very, very supportive, I wasn't physically with them a lot. And so then I looked at the other person or people that I was spending the most time with, and it was a screen. And that was not a positive narrative. That was a comparison. That was a less than. That was a scarcity mindset. And where scarcity mindset takes us is to think that there's never enough. And I told you, I was already struggling with it. So all it did was reinforce that whatever room I was going to walk into, I was probably going to be lacking in some way. I was going to be lacking importance because I didn't have a job outside my home. I was going to be, lacking accountability because I wasn't contributing to my home financially. I was going to be lacking because I wasn't like a super fashion star like the other moms that I saw on Instagram. I was every place that I thought about myself, I was lacking. And so I had to really consider the outside influences that were impacting my thoughts. Now, for many of you, this is family members. This is a person who you have daily conversation with that either is a person that encourages you to get closer to your best self, or it's a person that after you leave that interaction with them, you feel depleted, or you feel like you question your value. There's not a ton of in between, although there is. And in fall class, some of you got very upset with me for trying to help you categorize people as one or the other, because there are people that fall in the middle. But then you have to, if there are those middle people, then maybe they're maybe you just kind of cancel them out because they don't help to push you one way or the other. But I want you to remember that the quality of how you feel about your life, if it's based on your thoughts, then we really have to think about how the people we're around impact our ability to tell our story in a way that will leave us at the end of our story, at the end of our life, feeling like we lived a good story. Because that's how we're going to remember it. That's how I would tell my kids when we were writing, okay, looks like you established the character at the beginning. But am I going to care about what happens to your character at the end of the story because I understand enough about how they feel and why they're motivated? And am I going to see that they care enough about themselves to make the middle really impactful, to live out their values in the middle, which is the next thing I want to talk about, is living out our values. So once you're thinking, okay, so you were scrolling and hanging out with your 4-year-old, how do you get out of that? I really had to stop and think about the middle of my story and why I was so dissatisfied with how I was telling it. And I decided it all came down to one thing, and that was I needed to re-examine what my values were. Because right now, if you've been listening this far in the story, I placed a lot of value on outside influences. And I was placing very little value about who I was outside of what other people said I was. And what's really funny is that if you think about it, most of us don't even know really what other people think about us. We just assume, right? So, that's an interesting thing, just to consider. But so anyway, sorry. I was looking at your comments. So once I started to really think about what my values were, that was the shift for me. What did I value in my life? I value connection with people I care about. I value hard work. I value my family. I value being a person of integrity, which means if I say I'm going to, I will. I value not being perfect. I value being a person that is a support for other people. I value all of those things. And so once I started to reframe my thoughts around those values, to see where I was living those values in my life, then suddenly the thoughts and the feelings changed because I let them. And this is where the action of your life comes in. This is where I almost get teary thinking about it. Like, this is where the magic is. Because it's all about figuring out how you can make what is happening in your head and what is happening in your heart come to life in a way that is meaningful and impactful and doesn't only serve your life, but serves the greater good, serves your community, serves the people around you, allows you to feel connected. And right now I feel one of the reasons why I get teary about this topic is because I feel like it's so much of what we're all missing right now. And so if you know who you are, you were able to define at the beginning of my story, this is who I am. And that's today. and you took a little inventory, right? Just like I had my students do, and you started to list, what are the thoughts I have? What are the thoughts I have about myself? What are the thoughts I have about my life today? And then you started to consider, okay, how do those thoughts impact how I feel about my life experiences? And then you think, well, those two things aren't where I want them to be. That's when the values step in. So I just say, what I'm doing, this is the good part, what I'm doing with my hands, my actions are not in line with my values. And that is why my heart and my head feel so conflicted. So here's what I did. One of the first things I did was stop scrolling. And now some of you know that I am on social media frequently now, because I blog and my podcast, and I try to, post things about family and career and motherhood and life. But there's a difference with what I do now and what I did then. And the difference is that what I share because it's stuff that fills my cup. And I don't sit and passively just look at everybody else's life from a place of scarcity in my own. From a place of, I will never measure up in the environment that they are living in. I will never, that comparison, that's where comparison is tough. Because it leaves you in the never enough. Versus now I use it in a complimentary way. So when I am scrolling, I engage with people. I comment. I like their stuff, or I encourage them, or I interact on that platform in a way that's in line with my values. And so the action doesn't feel empty. The action doesn't feel like it's taking away from my value system. Now I know, and this has taken, I should tell you the time frame. I mean, this has taken 3 years for me to get to this spot. And in between there, like a major medical issue and other things that have kind of helped me have this little come to Jesus moment with myself. But the other thing I started to think of is, instead of looking for outside people to tell me that what I'm doing value, I need to decide that what I'm doing is valuable. And I need to change the way I'm talking to myself in my head about it. And so this is my version of my story and how it's changed from when I started to stay home to what I'm doing now. So originally, my story, my thoughts told me, well, you're not those things that you used to be. That's not true. I am those things I used to be. And in fact, I hope that in a lot of ways, I'm a better version of those attributes. Because I have put the time and energy into figuring out that they're important to me and being unwilling to compromise in those things, because I know that they're important to me. Not because I'm doing them because other people see value in them. That was big for me. There has to be something in your life right now that you do that you only do because somebody else tells you it's valuable. Did you know that you don't have to do it anymore if you don't think it's valuable? You're narrating your story. You're doing it. You're in charge of writing it. You're in charge of telling yourself how you're going to feel about it. People bring up stuff from childhood, or, I mentioned I was a middle child before. Do you know what's so cool? As an adult, You get to tell yourself through your life experiences that maybe, and please, I'm not talking about like severe trauma or, issues that really can be very detrimental and difficult for people. Okay, so I'm not trying to trivialize that at all. But there are some things that you maybe believe to be true about yourself from your childhood that you only believe to be true because you are thinking about them through the mind of how you viewed them as a child. You don't have to. No, you have to wait downstairs. Sorry. You don't have to view them that way anymore. That narrative may no longer work for you. That story that you're telling yourself, if it doesn't work anymore for you and it makes you feel bad and it makes you feel less than, it makes you stop telling it. Stop telling the story. You're the narrator. And this is what I didn't realize. When I was teaching my students about that character development, when I said, you know who you are you know who you want that character to be at the beginning, right? And you know where you want them to end up at the end. The quality of that character's life in the middle, you get to write. Well, guess what? In real life, despite there are so many things that happen, I know, good, bad, and in between, that are difficult, really difficult. But you get to decide how you think about them. You get to decide how you internalize them. You get to decide the quality of your story and how you remember it. I let for a long time my achievements and outside things, other people's opinions of me, which Ed Milet, who's one of my favorite speakers, always said, are none of your business. How other people feel about you, none of your biz. What other people think about you, none of your business. How do you think about you? How do you feel about you? And I'm not talking about being selfish and self-centered. I'm talking about wanting and choosing how you remember your life and how you feel about what you did. Once I really began to think about how my hands and feet needed to live out my values, my head and my heart worked it out. So much of that conflict, so much of trying to figure out, what my character should do next went away. Because when things came up, I asked myself, is it in line with my value? Is it in line with my system of values? What I think is important for our life, my life? And if the answer was yes, it was time. And then I knew that when I came home at the end of the day, how my Wonder Years narrator would be telling the story of my day throughout my day, I knew I could live with that and feel proud of that at the end of the day when I came home. And so that started to be enough for me. I'm the one that has to live with a story at the end. Nobody else has to live with that story, just me. Just me. And I want to feel good about the one that I'm telling. So we're getting kind of close to the end of our time. And I want to just leave you with a few things. First of all, you've been very patient as my child interrupted not once, but twice. And I'm pretty sure I got strict directions about not having your people interrupt you, and yet here we are. So I apologize. But that's life, I guess, right? It's life. I want to leave you with a few things. If you take what we had today and you think, I really want to examine further the story I'm telling of my life, I want you to start with that character. I want you to draw a stick person. And by the head, I want you to list the things that you most frequently think. What do I most frequently think about? Myself and my life. And then next to your heart, or the middle of your body, I want you to write down what you most frequently feel about your life. And just see if there's any inconsistencies there, right? And then finally, I want you to think about and write down on your little stick person, by your hands and your feet, how you are living out, how your actions support what is happening in your heart and your head. This is a blueprint. The most beautiful thing about life is that every single day, this can be day one of how you tell your story. This can be it. It can be. Maybe it's not day one of the story for everyone else. Who cares? Who cares? It can be day one of how you tell your story, how you're narrating your life in your mind. It could be day one today. This is it. You don't have to tell everybody else. You don't have to ask anyone else before you do it. You just get to do it. You get to do it. They will know by your actions. They will know by your actions that it was day one of your story. So after you do that, then I want you to make your list of your values. What is important to me in my life? And if the things that you wrote down in your heart and your head and your hands don't match those things that are important to you, it's okay, because today's day one. So now you get to decide what life could look like if you start living in line with your values, and how freeing that can be. Because once you do, you'll be like my students, who they knew what the ending was. They knew where the person wanted to be at the end. The hardest thing was writing out the middle to figure out how to get the character there. Well, we get to choose that every single day. And if we didn't choose it perfectly yesterday, who cares? We get to choose it perfectly for us today. We're all doing absolutely the best we can in the circumstances that we have every single time. It might not be your best version tomorrow, but it's the best version today. So you've done your character chart, you've made your list of values, and then if you're feeling really brave and really into this, I want you to think about setting up a habit or a routine that will help you reset yourself to live in your values every single day. Now, the girls who know me are already going to know what my answer is. And my answer for me personally is movement. I have to move my body. Exercise. I need to every day. Sometimes I jump on a trampoline. Sometimes I lift weights. Sometimes I walk outside. Sometimes I play in the yard with my kids. It doesn't matter, but I have to move, because moving my body changes my mind. It helps. It's my medicine. For some of you, that might be journaling. For some of you, that might be a morning meditation. For some of you, that might be I get up 10 minutes before everyone else because I need a quiet shower. But whatever it is, I want you to pick one thing, one routine, one thing that you do every single day that reminds you that your only job here is to live a life that's in line with your values, so that you can live with your story at the end. And that might mean eliminating some of those people. Like my scroll was negative. My scroll impacted the way I talked to myself in my head. It wasn't healthy for me. So I had to walk away from it. It's setting boundaries. It's saying no to this so that I can say yes to that. all of these things are absolutely possible, and they are just at your fingertips. They're right there. So often, I tend to be an anxiety girl that struggles a bit with anxiety, and so I've had to really work on what I'm talking to you about today. I've had to work on trusting that the story is as the story should be, that I am exactly in the journey where I'm meant to be, and that, thank God, I'm not at the end. Because if I was at the end of my story, if I was where I want to be, then it would be over. And I don't want it to be. I have a lot of story left to live. And so as we finish up tonight, I just want you to think of, after you've done those exercises, I want you to think of when you're setting those intentions about living in your values. I want you to remind yourself that we're not at the end of the story. We're not at the end. We're not at the end. And so we can't expect everything to be as we want it to be in the end, or it would be over. We just have to work on how we talk to ourselves about the story that we're living, so that we name it and call it and can feel it in all the joyful, wonderful, honest, even if it's icky, it's honest ways that life is meant to be. I loved being here with you tonight. I'm so grateful. You all have so many nice comments. We did a 6-week course on this that I just tried to condense into a very short amount of time, that hopefully I'll be back to do with Women's Empowerment Series again. And like I said, thanks for just allowing these human moments with my youngest coming in here tonight. And please message Women's Empowerment Series. We have so many beautiful opportunities for community members to get involved in. The next 4 Thursday nights, same time, same place. Please come back and watch. There are so many beautiful, amazing, inspirational people that are going to be talking to you, that care very, very much about just rooting for everyone and wanting to be present for you. So thank you to Women's Empowerment Series. Teresa and Carrie got me through the pandemic. I'm grateful for you. Ladies, Sue, my parents are on here. There's just so many wonderful people that are watching tonight, and I'm really, really grateful. So wishing you all a great rest of your Thursday night. Come back here next week, and check out our Facebook page for a drawing that I believe will be announced tomorrow. So grateful for all of you. See you soon.